You're not aligned with our future, Norah. That wasn't the first knife Gavin had twisted, just the first one he said out loud. But let's rewind 5 years to a Tuesday that smelled like burnt coffee and impending collapse, when Norah sat across from the founding partners, still green, still hopeful, still dumb enough to believe equity meant equality, yet just finished back-to-back interviews and pulled an all-nighter formatting the pitch deck they used to land series. Gavin was too hungover to show up, but when the founders clapped at the close, he materialized just in time to accept the praise like a delivery driver, taking tips for food he didn't cook. She noticed it then, a pattern that would soon calcify into corporate scripture. He wins, you serve, we're a team. He'd cross smug Silicon Valley smile curling on his face like a sticker peeling off a cheap laptop. But Norah knew, team meant you bleed, I brand. Still, she took the job. She even negotiated, quietly, while Gavin was waving his vape pen and bragging about his crypto portfolio. Norah slipped one line into her employment contract under performance-based incentives, a clause most people missed. One sentence. Legal approved it with a yawn, 5% commission on originated deals, payable in full upon termination. Just in case. Flash forward through 5 years of launch weeks that bled into weekends, of Slack pings at 2:17 a.m. about urgent slide edits, of watching Gavin roll into meetings with Red Bull breath and Norah's ideas hot in his mouth. She said nothing when he used her wireframes in a keynote and called them proof of concept skunk works. He said nothing when her designs won awards under his name. She didn't even flinch when he told the board, my team delivers because I pushed them past their comfort zone. But she remembered. She kept a Google Drive folder titled Insurance. Inside, copies of proposals, drafts, client names, one tiny clause circled in red. She updated it like clockwork every quarter. By year 5, burnout was no longer a feeling, it was wallpaper. People quit, or got written up, or quietly disappeared. Norah stayed. Not because she loved the job, but because she knew how it ended. And then came the lead. It arrived on a Wednesday, slipped into her inbox like a used napkin. Subject, FWD, cold intro from unknown. Gavin's note above it was short, knock yourself out superstar. Translation, go waste your time. She clicked the thread. It was messy. Assistant's assistant had reached out about cloud-based modular infrastructure solutions, which Gavin had already labeled a death spiral vertical in the weekly stand-up. Most of the team had brushed it off, a graveyard of buzzwords and half-baked interest. But Norah didn't. She set up a call, then another, then a coffee. She took notes in her tiny leather notebook and saved every slide in a private folder. They weren't just another vendor, they were big. Like government contract level big. They had capital. They had use cases. And most important, they had nobody else courting them, yet. She never told Gavin. Instead, she leaned into the chaos he gave her. He dumped 3 failing launch rollouts on her desk the same week, an intentional smokescreen. You're great at cleaning up disasters, he said, laughing with his mouth half full of protein bar. Norah smiled. Happy to help. Her nights turned into caffeine-powered marathons patching other people's code. Her days became diplomacy. She nurtured that lead. She talked to operations, then procurement, then strategy. She offered mock-ups, feedback, patience, and always documentation. Every invite showed her as the originator. Every NDA bore her name. She didn't brag. She didn't loop in stakeholders. She just built like a ghost laying bricks no one could see, yet. At one point Evan poked his head into her cube just long enough to sigh and ask, what's the on that launch delay? Then he saw her screen. What's Norex's dynamics? He asked, chewing loudly. Just a dead lead, she replied without looking up. He grunted and walked away. Norah minimized the contract draft on her monitor, sipped her lukewarm coffee, and opened a fresh email tab. Subject line, Proposal V3 Final Pricing Review. Attachment, 37-page slide deck, timeline, feature scope, budget, with her initials in the footer of every page. The machine never stopped. But Norah had learned its rhythm, and it was almost time to jam a wrench in the gears. The client's name was Norrex Dynamics, but Norah came to think of them as the quiet giant. Their offices were tucked into a brutalist slab of concrete and badge access steel out in Arlington. Department of Defense proximity, military-grade HVAC, and a front desk receptionist who could probably disassemble a Glock in 30 seconds flat. They didn't post job openings. They didn't do flashy press. Hell, they didn't even have a real LinkedIn page, just a blue and gray placeholder and a logo that looked like a weather app icon. But the deeper Norah went, the clearer it became, they weren't nobodies. They were the kind of client that could move an entire quarter's revenue needle just by whispering yes. She met their procurement lead over coffee, black, no cream, no chit-chat. His name was Aaron, and he asked sharp, surgical questions. Norah answered every one. Didn't oversell. Didn't posture. She brought diagrams. Timelines. Even failure contingencies. She didn't say synergy once. At the end of the meeting, Aaron said, "We're used to salespeople." "You're not that." "I'm not," she agreed. "I'm a builder." He nodded slowly. "Keep building." From that point on, she never missed a beat. Every interaction was logged, not in some half-baked CRM where Gavin could snoop and try to insert himself. She built her own archive, time-stamped emails, PDFs of agendas, Zoom transcriptions with her name as the host. She used a burner Trello board to track follow-ups. Every doc she sent had metadata with her initials in the author field. Aaron asked for a white paper. She sent one she'd ghosted under a VP's name last quarter, with the byline quietly revised to hers. Back at the office, Gavin was neck-deep in a culture realignment campaign, which meant new posters in the break room, extreme ownership in impact font, and a Slack channel for radical feedback, which quickly devolved into people passive-aggressively requesting chairs that didn't squeak. Norah didn't engage. She kept her head down, working in the space between things. No one asked where she was going when she left early on Thursdays. No one noticed when she blocked out hours as training and instead took calls with Aaron and his team about API security frameworks. She spoke their language. She didn't pitch. She advised. She became useful. And the more useful she became, the more Norrex let her in. First it was product engineers. Then budget owners. Eventually, a director with signing authority. Every time they invited her into a new meeting, she marked the date, the time, the attendees. She had a spreadsheet color-coded by department and influence. Green meant allies, yellow meant observers, red meant legal. By month 3, they were talking deployment roadmaps. Back at the firm, Gavin handed her a Jira board filled with stretch objectives. When she pushed back, gently, diplomatically, he clapped a hand on her shoulder and said, "Come on, superstar, slow down now." Norah smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. Later that day she updated her insurance folder. She added a new subdirectory, Norrex Dynamics/Phase 2. Inside it, a memo of understanding with her name as sender, a summary of system requirements, and an NDA signed on company letterhead. She never forwarded it to sales ops. Never logged it in CRM. Never told Gavin. If anyone had looked closely, they'd have seen her calendar had entire blocks titled Legacy Systems Audit. They'd have noticed the pattern of flights and calls and follow-ups that looked like something big. But no one looked. Gavin had convinced himself she was a mule, reliable, unthreatening, invisible. She let him think that. Because invisibility had its perks. It let her build without interruption. Without politics. Without credit. She was a ghost laying bricks in a wall no one saw coming. Behind that wall, $24 million and counting. The death march began with a smile. "All right, team," Gavin said, pacing in front of the glass wall like a deranged TED Talk reject. "We're going to hit beta by March 1st. No exceptions. No excuses." It was January 9th. Every engineer in the room stared at him like he just asked them to build a rocket ship out of paper clips and unpaid overtime. The project, a clunky semi-integrated customer feedback dashboard Gavin had promised to investors as industry-disrupting, was still missing core features. Half the UX hadn't even been approved. QA hadn't touched a line of code. And the lead dev had just quietly handed in her resignation that morning, citing prolonged psychological erosion. Gavin didn't blink. "If you're not dying, you're not trying," he declared, like a man quoting himself on a mug no one asked for. "I want fire in your eyes and sweat in your coffee." Norah blinked once. She was seated at the end of the table, pen motionless, posture perfect, the embodiment of polite silence. She didn't flinch when Gavin pointed to her and said, "Norah is going to quarterback this whole thing. She's a machine." Everyone groaned inside. But no one dared look directly at her. That afternoon the Jira board doubled in size. Tasks stacked like roaches in a flood. Front-end tickets with no specs. Back-end integrations that required 3 outside vendors who weren't even under contract yet. Gavin slapped on arbitrary priority flags and tagged everyone with it. #here@channel@God. Norah opened the task list, duplicated it into a separate folder, and quietly untagged herself from everything non-critical. Then she opened her real folder, Norx. While Gavin chased his ego into another meltdown, she was in final contract mode. Quiet Giant was ready. Procurement had finished their review. Legal had one clause left to sign off. The infrastructure team was already blocking out sandbox space for deployment. One of the directors had even asked if she'd be available for a post-signature roadmap session in February. They didn't say if anymore. They said when. But Norah said nothing. She nodded through sprint meetings, accepted late-night DMs about broken test environments, listened to Gavin's voice notes where he called her the last adult in the room. Then, each day after 6 p.m., when the Slack noise dimmed to a low hiss, she turned off all notifications, opened her encrypted folder and got to work, pricing updates, integration timelines, licensing frameworks, every piece submitted with her digital signature, every revision with tracked changes that pointed straight to her. She reviewed scopes, cleaned up timelines, added polish to the statement of work. It was meticulous, surgical, a mosaic of evidence. Somewhere around 1:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, she uploaded the final draft to Norex's internal portal. At 7:12 a.m., she showed up at the office with a venti coffee and no complaints. Gavin burst out of his glass office with a half-untucked shirt and the energy of a man high on his own fumes. "We need to cut QA and ship a preview to the board this week." "Fine with that, right, Norah?" "Sure," she said calmly. "I'll make it happen." Then she turned and went back to her desk, added another document to the insurance folder, Norex's price sheet, final PDF, and scheduled a final alignment call with their legal team. She didn't tell a soul. By Friday, her team was on edge. Burnout wasn't just seeping in, it was pouring through the ceiling tiles. One junior dev broke down during stand-up. Another openly called Gavin a sociopath in the group chat. HR issued a wellness memo titled, "Mental Strength is a Muscle," with a photo of a woman doing yoga in a war zone. Norah kept her head down. Because she wasn't building Gavin's fantasy anymore. She wasn't here to keep his startup dream alive. She was carving out the final inches of something bigger, something real. Every time she looked at that $24 million contract with her name etched in the deal originator field like a silent fingerprint, she reminded herself of one thing: he doesn't know it yet, but he just made me very rich. Gavin thought he was overworking her. He didn't realize she was outgrowing him, quietly, strategically, and the clock was almost up. It hit her inbox at 8:43 a.m. sharp, a calendar invite titled All Hands, Urgent, Mandatory Attendance. AAN had even added a thunderbolt emoji like they were about to be blessed by divine intervention instead of dragged into another ego-boosting ambush. No agenda. Just the usual chest thump formatting and the suspicious urgency of someone about to take credit for a miracle they didn't understand. By 9 a.m. the entire team was packed into the fourth-floor conference room, half of them still blinking sleep from their eyes, the other half quietly weeping into $3 bagels. The burnout stench was so thick it had texture. Gavin strolled in with a fresh haircut and a shirt unbuttoned one too many levels. His victory look. Big news, he said, clapping his hands like a failed game show host. Massive breakthrough with a strategic partner. I've been in back-channel conversations for weeks, tight-lipped stuff, very hush-hush. Norah froze mid-sip. Her coffee hit the back of her throat like motor oil. He clicked the remote and up came a slide, Norex's Dynamic Strategic Deployment Partnership. Their logo. Her deck. Her scope document, cropped and rebranded. The metadata stripped. Her fingerprints scrubbed from the glass. He smiled that slick wine-tasting smile. This partner is going to change the game. Custom deployment capabilities. Enterprise-grade scalability. Fully modular infrastructure. Basically, the future. There it was. Her work reduced to bullet points. Gavin didn't flinch. Didn't even glance her way. The whole room clapped like they just watched a dog play piano. Norah sat perfectly still, one hand resting on her notebook like it might detonate. In her head, a single phrase repeated on loop. You stupid bastard. You really think you can eat the fruit and bury the tree? He paced a few more laps around the PowerPoint slides, opened the floor for alignment questions. No one dared ask. Someone whispered, "Wait, when did this happen?" Gavin deflected. Behind the scenes. Quiet hustle. You know how I do. Norah knew. She didn't say a word. Just nodded with the rest of them, jotted down a fake note, and smiled like a lobotomy patient. On the way out, Gavin clapped her on the back. Knew you'd come through under pressure, he said. She didn't blink. That afternoon, she returned to her desk, opened the folder labeled Norex/signature packet/final, and quietly forwarded the entire contract to legal. The subject line was simple. Record keeping, deal originator Norah Stahn. She attached the email chain with procurement. The original NDA timestamped 6 months prior. A digital signature log from the client's DocuSign portal. Every field initialed. Every clause reviewed. Her name on it all. Then she locked her computer, walked down the hall to the HR floor, and requested a printed copy of her employment contract. Everything okay? The rep asked. Routine, she replied. 10 minutes later, she was in the empty break room flipping pages, her eyes scanned the fine print, her fingers sliding across the familiar clause still buried deep in the sea of boilerplate. Section 9.2, Commission on Originated Contracts. Employee shall be entitled to a 5% commission on any deal directly originated and finalized under the employee's oversight, payable in full within 14 business days of termination for any reason. Still valid. Still binding. Still hers. She folded the page, slid it into her bag, and walked out as the sun dipped behind the skyline like a slow-closing vault door. Back at her desk, Slack was on fire with congratulations. Evan had already posted a team selfie captioned, "Big moves with the big dogs." Strategy. Speed. Success. Norah's name wasn't mentioned. But her inbox buzzed again, a message from Aaron at Norex. Let me know if the contract handoff went smoothly. We're excited to build with you. Norah replied simply. All received. Let's make it count. Then she muted Gavin's channel, updated her insurance folder with the finalized PDF, and closed her laptop for the night. The silence of strange calm settled in. He had just fired the starting gun and he didn't even know he was the target. The final blow came with catered muffins. Gavin had scheduled another all-hands, this time with calendar flair. Rocket strategic realignment session, mandatory attendance. Let's build the future together. The kind of title that practically screams bloodbath with a side of synergy. When Norah walked into the glass-walled conference room that morning, she already knew. Everyone did. There was a scent in the air, faux lemon cleaner and silent dread. On the table, a fruit tray sweating under fluorescent lights. Untouched muffins lined up like hostages. And branded notebooks no one would open. Gavin strutted in like a discount Bezos, wearing a blazer over a t-shirt that said build. Disrupt. Repeat. His smile was preloaded, eyes scanning the room like a shark doing market analysis. Thanks for coming, everyone, he began, like he just stumbled into the room instead of orchestrated this moment like a hit. Today's about vision. About recalibrating toward our core values. Trimming the fat. And focusing on what matters. Trimming the fat. Norah sat in the third seat from the left. Hands folded. Jaw still. Her stomach didn't turn. It calcified. Gavin launched into a slideshow about burn rate sensitivity, fancy term for the fact that he'd lit half the budget on fire chasing an AI integration no one asked for. Charts appeared. Phrases like resource misallocation and unexpected overhead bloating floated on the screen like turds in a swimming pool. Then came the pivot. Which brings me, he said, eyes locking onto her with the focus of a man who thought he was subtle, to leadership accountability. Norah didn't breathe. She didn't need to. Gavin clicked to a slide labeled Realigning Key Roles. This company has been through explosive growth, he continued. But not all systems scale. And sometimes, hard decisions are required. He turned to face the team. Effective today, we're parting ways with Norah Stahn. We thank her for her contributions. No warning. No review. Just a decapitation served lukewarm in public. Gasps rippled through the room like aftershocks. Someone dropped a pen. Another stared into her coffee like it might offer guidance. A junior dev whispered, "Wait, what?" Norah didn't speak. Because Gavin wasn't done. Frankly, some of the oversights in last quarter's budget came from mismanagement within product ops, he said, glancing her way. We can't afford to carry legacy inefficiencies. Legacy inefficiencies. He just labeled her dead weight, in front of her team, in front of interns who looked up to her, in front of HR sat near the exit like vultures in blazers ready to pounce with printed NDAs and a courtesy escort. But Norah didn't flinch. Not externally. Inside, though, something shifted. Rage. Not loud. Not dramatic. No, this was molten. Controlled. Beautiful in its containment. She stood. Her chair made a clean, soft scrape across the floor. She didn't glare at Gavin. Didn't scold. She looked at the team, real people with sunken eyes and calloused hope, and nodded once. Then she walked out, ignoring the HR rep trying to hand her a white envelope like a consolation prize. Gavin chuckled behind her as she exited. You're not aligned with our future, he said. Nervous clapping followed. That awkward, middle school play kind of applause, a mix of fear, confusion, and self-preservation. Gavin beamed like a man who thought he'd won. What he didn't know, what not a soul in that glass tomb understood, was that Norah had already won. She didn't head for the elevators. She went to her desk. Packed slowly. Methodically. Her plants. Her notebooks. That tiny thumb drive containing every document tied to the Norex deal, the deal Gavin just tried to wrap around himself like a superhero cape. Before she left, she opened her laptop one last time. Composed a single email to legal with one sentence and an attachment. Subject, Clause 9.2, Commission upon termination. She hit send. Shut the lid. And whispered. Aligned now. Then she walked into the sun untouched by their applause. The email went out at 3:11 p.m. sharp. Subject line, Clause 9.2 Commission upon termination. No emojis. No legalese games. Just the kind of sentence that sounds boring until it detonates. Norah didn't even draft it herself. She handed everything to her attorney Marcy Lerner, partner at a firm so sharp it made compliance officers flinch. Marcy had read the contract line twice, laughed once, then said, "Oh honey." He stepped on a landmine with steel toe boots. By the time Norah stepped into the parking garage, duffel bag in one hand, key fob in the other, Marcy had already hit send. Inside that email was everything: a PDF copy of the fully executed Norex contract, complete with DUS signed audit trail, a spreadsheet of her logged communications, 36 emails, 14 scheduled calls, 5 white papers all authored or initiated by Norah Stahn, screenshots of Slack threads, time-stamped calendar invites with her name as organizer, even a voice memo she'd saved from the procurement lead casually saying, "Just loop Norah in, she's been our main point." At the bottom of the email, an invoice, $1,200,000 and 0 cents, due within 14 business days per Clause 9.2. There was no dramatic footnote. No demand for explanation. Just clean facts with the surgical precision of someone who knew the rules before the game began. By 3:34 p.m., legal had opened the message. By 3:36 p.m., Gavin's phone buzzed on the conference table during his second victory meeting of the day. He ignored it. At 3:40 p.m., it buzzed again. And again. And again. Meanwhile, back in the main Slack workspace, things started shifting. First it was just a question in #random, "Hey, was Norah working on Norex or NA?" Then someone posted a screenshot, an old team planning doc with her initials next to the partner outreach column. 5 minutes later, an engineer dropped a timestamp change log showing Norah's version control tags on the proposal deck. It snowballed. Whispers became theories. Theories turned into threads. People started combing their inboxes, pulling receipts, whispering in DMs. By 4 p.m., a PM in Product Ops sent a cryptic message to a colleague, "Check your email, you're going to want popcorn." By 4:12 p.m., Gavin's calendar was suddenly booked wall-to-wall by legal, HR, and one ominously titled invite, "Urgent Compliance Review," with a required attendee, General Counsel. Marcy CC'd Norah on every reply. She didn't open them. Was already halfway through a margarita at a rooftop bar 2 neighborhoods over, sun on her face, her phone on silent, a half-smile on her lips as the city moved beneath her, oblivious to the slow-motion implosion she'd left behind. Back at HQ, Gavin finally read the clause. His lips moved as he reread the line about 5% commission payable upon termination like it might change if he squinted hard enough. Blood drained from his face like someone had just told him the IPO was cancelled. He slammed the laptop shut. Stood. Then immediately sat back down. Because he knew, she'd played him. Played the long game. And now the board was going to want answers. Slack kept pinging, but no one said her name out loud. They just called her her. As in, did you hear what her lawyer sent? Did you know her name's on the contract metadata? Wait, wasn't that her deck from Q3? By 5 p.m., HR stopped responding to messages. Legal locked down certain drives. Gavin's assistant called out sick for the next 2 days. Someone printed the invoice and left it face up on the office printer. No one moved it. It just sat there. $1.2 million in plain sight. Every dollar earned by someone they thought they could fire quietly. They didn't realize, the quiet ones don't go away. They detonate. By Monday morning, air in the office felt different. Thicker. Quieter. Like everyone was bracing for a storm that had already passed, but left the sky trembling. Gavin walked in late. No coffee. No smile. Just that pale, clenched jaw look of a man who's realized the quicksand is above the neck now. He stormed into legal like a CEO in a hostage crisis. He snapped before even sitting down, she didn't originate that deal, I did. Been in conversations with Norah for months. He hadn't. He barely knew how to spell Norah 3 weeks ago. The legal director, Patricia Nguyen, calm, terrifying, caffeine-addicted, stared at him without blinking. She clicked her mouse twice, rotated the screen toward him and said, "Let's walk through the documentation, Gavin." First came the calendar invites. 36 of them. All hosted by Norah. All with external guests from Norah. Gavin's name appeared in exactly 0. Next, a screenshot of the initial NDA, Norah's name as sender, timestamped 6 months back. Then the signed SOW, pricing breakdowns, internal notes, all saved under folders Norah had created and shared only with legal, not sales ops. Then came the email thread, Aaron from Norah had written, "Thanks Norah, as always. Appreciate your responsiveness. You've made this process smooth start to finish. Looking forward to final signature this week." And then the kill shot, a voice memo retrieved from a recorded Zoom call, Norah's standard practice for compliance, where Aaron says, "Norah, when you first reached out I didn't think we'd find alignment, but you proved me wrong. This deal wouldn't be happening without you." Gavin stared at the screen like it had just insulted his lineage. She wasn't authorized to act as lead, he tried. There's no documentation that she was formally. Patricia cut him off with one raised finger. The commission clause doesn't require formal lead designation. It says, directly originated and finalized under employees' oversight. Which she has documented. Thoroughly. She manipulated this, Gavin snapped. She documented this, Patricia corrected. Across the hallway, HR was imploding. Amanda, the VP of People Operations, was flipping through Norah's personnel file like it might grow a new clause if she stared hard enough. This was in her contract the whole time, she muttered. "Yes," whispered a junior HR rep, half hiding behind their monitor. We signed off on it in year 1 during the retention adjustments. It wasn't flagged. Why the hell wasn't this caught in offboarding?" Amanda barked. "Because no one reviewed the individual clause library. We used the standard checklist." Standard checklist. That's what Norah had counted on. That they'd follow routine. Not read fine print. That they'd fire her like any other disgruntled mid-level ops lead without ever thinking she might have built her own parachute, stitch by invisible stitch. By 2 p.m., the Slack grapevine was acidic. #random had turned into a true crime podcast. Gavin's trying to deny it now. Legal has receipts, someone said. She has a clause that forces payout if she's terminated, bro. She sammaried this company. Someone made a meme, Gavin's head on a dumpster fire with the caption, "When you fire the rainmaker and get billed for the flood." The board had already seen the invoice. Finance was looped in. Gavin's discretionary budget was frozen pending internal investigation. The end-of-quarter bonuses were flagged for reallocation review. In meetings, Gavin stopped talking. Stopped pacing. Stopped laughing. Stopped making backhanded compliments no one asked for. He just sat there, stiff in his ergonomic chair, blinking slower than usual, sweat ghosting under his collar like shame in cotton form. Every time legal mentioned contractual exposure, his eye twitched. Every time someone said Norex, he cleared his throat and said nothing. Norah's name was never spoken in those meetings. But her presence lived between every slide. Every line item. Every sideways glance between execs. They hadn't just fired her. They'd uncaged her. And now they had 14 business days left before $1.2 million came due. No one dared ask the real question out loud: are we actually going to pay her? Because the answer was already pacing around legal's inbox, and it was wearing heels. By Thursday morning, the boardroom smelled like fear masked in eucalyptus diffuser oil. Directors had flown in, 3 of them, to be exact, from Palo Alto, Chicago, and one eternally pissed-off woman named Denise who only appeared when something was burning. Gavin wore a jacket for the first time in months, not because of the chill, there was none, but because sweat was now a permanent fixture under his arms and he needed something to soak it up besides shame. Patricia from legal gave her update with the precision of a guillotine. Yes, the clause is valid. Yes, documentation supports her claim. Yes, we are exposed. And yes, we are in the press window. That last bit hit harder than the rest. The press window was what they called the phase right before a story could emerge. One LinkedIn post from a disgruntled engineer or one loose Slack screenshot could become a Business Insider headline by lunch. Denise looked at Gavin like she wanted to pour his soul into a blender. How did this happen? She asked, voice calm as death. She went rogue, Gavin said. She went documented, Patricia corrected. Rogue is what you did. Finance slid a sheet across the table. Projected exposure, $1.2 to $2 million. Projected fallout if challenged and made public, $79 million in client trust loss, talent attrition, and reputational decay. The math wasn't hard. It never is when your ego costs more than your product roadmap. An hour later, Norah was on a beach. Not figuratively. Literally. Toes in sand. Kindle in hand. Iced drink sweating beside her. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. Then came a second. This one left a voicemail. The transcription popped up on her screen like a gift from the karma gods. Hi Miss Stahn, this is Philip Torrance, director at Evermark Holdings. I'd like to discuss an amicable settlement regarding your termination. We'd prefer not to escalate this. Please call me at your earliest convenience. She sipped her drink. Smirked. Took her time. An hour later she called back. Philip. What a surprise, she said, as if she hadn't already Googled him and found the one photo where he looked like a bored Komodo dragon in a suit. We understand there's been some confusion, Philip began, gently clearing his throat. There's no confusion, she replied. There's a contract. There's documentation. There's an unpaid invoice. He chuckled, awkward and forced. Yes, well, we'd like to propose a fast-track settlement. No delays. Full payout. Clean separation. Our only ask is standard, a mutual NDA for both parties. Norah paused. Looked out at the ocean. Watched a seagull steal someone's sandwich with zero guilt. Let me stop you there, she said. You want to pay me? Fine. But there's no NDA. Philip coughed. That's not how we typically, I don't care how you typically do it, she said, voice like ice melting slow. I want the check, not a gag order. If I decide to tell this story one day on a podcast or maybe just over drinks, I don't want to ask for permission. Silence. Then, reluctantly, Philip asked, what would make that clause worth removing? Norah smiled. A clean wire transfer. Full amount. 14 days becomes 4. You add a no NDA rider and I sign by morning. She could hear him typing, probably mouthing the words, "Is she bluffing?" into the void. But there was nothing to bluff. She had the receipts. The leverage. The audience, if she wanted it. By sundown, Marcy sent over the revised agreement. One line stood out in bold: "This agreement does not include a non-disclosure clause or limitation on public discussion by the payee." Norah signed with a stylus. Initialed every page. Attached a post-it for flavor, "Thanks for the bonus." Back in the boardroom, Gavin sat with his arms folded as Patricia slid the executed contract across the table. Denise didn't speak. Just stared. "End-of-year comp?" Gavin asked weakly. "Frozen," Patricia replied. "Pending internal review." Gavin nodded, hollow-eyed. Later that night someone posted anonymously on Blind, "Director here. Just watched a terminated employee out-lawyer our entire C-suite. If you're reading this, Norah, you're a legend." She was. And she still hadn't said a word. Yet. At 9:02 a.m., the bank notification slid onto Norah's lock screen like the final chord of a symphony she'd been quietly composing for 5 years. Deposit, $1,200,000 US wire credit, Evermark Holdings LLC. No confetti. No bells. Just black text on a white background, as calm and unbothered as she felt. She didn't react, not outwardly. Just blinked once. Let the silence settle. Same silence she'd worked in for half a decade while Gavin played lead guitarist in a one-man band nobody asked to see. The deposit cleared. She opened her work-issued laptop one last time. Slack still chimed, desperate and unaware. #build team. #sprint. And Gavin's latest motivational sewage and #executive thoughts: pain is temporary. Disruption is forever. She rolled her eyes. Opened settings. Deactivated. She didn't post a goodbye. No dramatic farewell. Just logged out, uninstalled, and shut the lid, like burying a body she'd already mourned. Across town in the Evermark Tower, Gavin's phone rang before his third coffee. He recognized the number. Finance. His stomach dropped before the call even connected. "Hey Gavin," came the too cheerful voice of Jenna, the controller. "Just looping you in, we've reallocated the queue for discretionary funds." Legal advised? "We prioritized settlement retention over executive incentives." Silence. "You're saying my Q4 budget is gone?" She said brightly, "Oh, and your travel account's frozen too. Compliance flagged your Cabo expenses as non-essential." His throat made a small clicking noise. "And the team's aware?" he asked. "Oh yeah," she said. "We had to shift around bonuses to cover the payout. Bit of a morale dip. You might want to do a culture check-in or something." Click. Gavin stared at his screen, the one that used to beam with dashboards and control. Now it just blinked with unread DMs from pissed-off managers and a Google Doc someone anonymously titled, "Gavin's Greatest Misses." He minimized the window and sat in the glow of his ruined little kingdom. Meanwhile, Norah was 5 blocks away, outside a cafe with real sunlight on her face and 0 unread notifications. She sipped her iced coffee, slowly. Vietnamese. Condensed milk. Extra ice. The taste of calm. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Lex, a former dev she'd mentored, someone who used to work weekends beside her, who once got reamed by Gavin for not thinking big enough. The text said, "Just heard. You're a legend." Norah smiled. Typed back, "Not a team player. Just a closer." Then she put the phone down and let the sun do its thing.